Welcome, everybody, and to the end of conference for 2025. We've got one more thing to do, actually, though, before conference ends. I'm Irma Donaldson, and I am the chair of the RCSLT. I hope everyone's had an engaging time. You've had an opportunity to explore lots of content over the last couple of days, and you've made connections with people. We have had over 1,300 colleagues on the conference platform over the last couple of days, so that's awesome. Before I hand over to our final speaker for conference and for today, I'd like to cover some housekeeping rules. These aren't new if you've attended any of the sessions so far. Please post your questions in the question tab on the right-hand side. Questions will remain visible after the session, and they can be answered by Radha or the chair or by me after the session. Please use the chat function on the right-hand side and share comments and feedback, and be respectful in your comments, and the Q&A in the chat box is being monitored, so please be kind and respectful when sharing your thoughts. If anyone has any technical issues, then please head to the help desk tab on the left-hand side and speak to one of the platform technicians for support. Anything that's RCSLT related, though, is going to be directed to RCSLT staff on the RCSLT exhibitor page in the sponsor area. So what I would like to do now is to hand over, I think, to our sponsor, who's going to share something with us. And after that, we will then be coming back to me.
So you have a method for juggling appointments, which is great, until your method turns into madness. Save yourself the scheduling nightmare. With Splose AI in your calendar, you'll never have to dig through schedules again. Splose. Practice management handled.
Awesome. So I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Radha Mudgil, who is an NHS GP and the author of a book, Know Your Own Power: Inspiration, Motivation, and Practical Tools for Life, which focuses on empowering people to understand and improve their mental well-being, offering practical tools, motivation, and honest guidance to help readers build resilience, to develop healthy habits, and to take control of their lives. Radha has a wonderful presentation lined up for us, which will focus on practical tips to help us maintain well-being whilst dealing with busy schedules and hectic lives. Isn't that everyone? Over to you, Radha.
Thank you so much, Emma, and it's lovely to be with all of you. I'm very honoured to be doing the final keynote actually for your conference. I know you've had a really jam-packed couple of days, and this is the end of it, so I'm sure you're all kind of full of knowledge and also probably a bit tired. So I'm hoping that what I can do in my speech this afternoon is just to give you a little bit of a break, inspire you, and I suppose really just give you some practical tips around how to manage your health and well-being. I'm a doctor, I'm a GP, I work in A&E at the moment. I know that a lot of you are practitioners in clinical environments. I know that some of you are researchers. I know that lots of you do all kinds of different things in the world of speech and language. And in all of those different worlds, no matter where you work, things have been pretty tough lately. And one of the things that we really, I think, is all of us need to do is to think, sort of step back and think about our own well-being. How does that impact us? How are we feeling? Because with that, we can then move forward in terms of supporting, doing our work well, but also fundamentally building that kind of team spirit, that collaboration that comes with coming together, so that we can do, we can kind of go out into the world and do what we want to do as well as we can. So I'm big fans of everyone to do with speech and language therapy. Just from my limited exposure in hospital medicine, the speech and language therapists that I've seen have literally transformed lives. And I know that everyone working in research behind the scenes in all these different environments to do with speech and language. First of all, I just want to say thank you to you, because not often people say thank you, or you don't necessarily hear it because you're so busy. But for me, and this is what my talk is all about, communication, supporting people to be able to express who they are, what they need, what they want, is such a fundamental part of human nature. It's such a fundamental part of our mental and emotional well-being. And when we have that ability to express who we are, or to express what we want to say or what we need, that can really impact our mental health, our well-being, and the kind of opportunities and pathway that we have in our lives. So first of all, a massive thank you to all of you. But this talk is for you. This talk, I hope, will persuade you that you deal with speech and language and the therapy of that. This is very much around words and the power of words and labeling, how we talk to ourselves, how we communicate with others, and just potentially how just changing a few of those words, reframing a few of the words and the phrases we use to ourselves and others can actually have a big impact on our health and well-being on a day-to-day basis. So I'm just going to ask to go to the next slide, please. So these are a few cobbled together pictures of some of the work that I've done. I fell into broadcasting. I'm a GP. I qualified back in 2003. So gosh, almost, I don't know how many years that is now, but quite a few years. But I fell into broadcasting. My sister saw an advert on a BBC Three programme. She brought it back to me and said, "Oh, Rada, why don't you try this?" And because she was my older sister and I'm a compliant younger sister, I said, "All right, why not?" So I went for a BBC Three programme. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed meeting people and understanding their stories, and helping, I suppose, support them to make a change in their life. But I also love learning from them. And once I decided I liked that, I thought, right, that's the thing I'm going to do now. So I sent off millions of emails, tried lots of different things. And I've been really lucky to have opportunities to write, to broadcast on the radio, to go on television, even living with puppets in a CBeebies house, singing about emotions. I've been very lucky to do that, and I enjoy that work such a lot. And the reason for these photos is really because I suppose, just as you focus on speech and language, I suppose I'm focusing on communication and the kind of extension of speech and language into communication, how we express ourselves, how we communicate with each other, how we understand ourselves as well, and our own mental health and emotional well-being. And for me, words, communication, language, they are literally everything. So yeah, we'll just move on to the next slide. Is that right for you?
It's recording, Kathleen. Keep it still.
All right.
Hello, Dr. Rada. It's Hacker the Dog here from the telly now. I've heard you're a big fan of my work. So, as a big fan, would you look at this rash?
Now, some of you hopefully might recognise this puppet. This is Hacker the dog from CBBC, and I didn't look at his rash, but I have been asked to give advice on quite a few things. I'm really honoured to be asked to do that, and to be here with you today. And I always say that whenever I give advice, it's advice that I need to take myself. And the reason I love talking to people and giving advice and hearing people's stories, and going into lots of different, I suppose, areas of the world or of life is because I hear from other people. I hear about what they're going through, about the challenges they're facing. And that informs me, and I learn such a lot from every single person that I interact with. But I have had people also in my gym class ask me to look at a rash, which I haven't done. There's going to be none of that today. We're going to focus very much on words and the words we use to describe ourselves and how that can really help us, I suppose, get through some challenging times. And I'm sure all of you, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, have had lots of challenges. The world feels a very anxious place. It feels very uncertain. You know, I myself have seen lots of patients, lots of friends, people I know really struggling with, you know, how they deal with life. People have had health issues, relationship breakdowns, financial pressures, work pressures, you know, trying to balance all the things that we have in life. So there's a lot going on. And one of the ways we can actually, I suppose, ameliorate that or reduce that pressure and that stress is really by understanding how we're thinking about ourselves, how we're labeling ourselves, how much we're communicating with others, how much we're expressing how we feel and what we think. And our thoughts and our feelings really do have a direct impact on our actions and our behaviours and how we feel day to day. And a lot of people talk about mental health. Mental health, I think, sometimes has become now a little bit of a big concept or a diagnosis that's over there in the corner. But actually, for me, mental well-being, emotional well-being, feeling good day to day is very much tied into those moment-to-moment sort of decisions, those moment-to-moment choices or feelings or thoughts that we have, that when we're feeling low, if we notice those, how can we then choose to step out of those, choose a strategy to use to help ourselves feel a bit better? And in those moment-to-moment choices, if we can practice those and build a habit, then actually that is our mental health. So I'm very much about breaking it down from something very, very big into something a bit smaller. And as I said before, our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviours, they're very much related to our thinking, our words that we're using. And we don't even realise it sometimes. But I'm going to hopefully unpack that today. So we'll move on to the next slide. So I've explained about who I am really. My personal journey, as I said, I've been a doctor since 2003. I worked in hospital medicine for about 8 years. I then moved into general practice and did that full time for quite a number of years. And so I've seen lots of different scenarios, stories of patients, of staff, of colleagues, I suppose really facing their own challenges. And one of my big passions and one of the things that I really love talking about is how we get through life. How do we manage all of these difficulties and challenges that we have in our life? How do we best do those? What are the tips and tricks we can learn from each other that we can use and practice and get into habits with? And my ethos really, I think personally, is that we've all got inside ourselves that kind of untapped knowledge base, that powerhouse. We know what we like. We know really kind of what works for us. When we were little, when we were 4 or 5 years old, we knew that if we went to see our friends, or we played outside, or we used our imagination and crafted or created something, that would make us feel good. But so surely as we grow up and we become adults, we have certain layers of conditioning, we have pressures of life that come on, and so we forget all of those basics that actually once used to make us feel happy and safe and emotionally safe. And so my thing is not about teaching anyone anything or telling them what to do at all. It's more about, I think, reminding or supporting people and reminding them of what they already know. So hopefully a little bit of that will come out in the talk today. So we'll move on to the next slide. So yes, what will you get from today? Well, hopefully a fair bit. I want to talk about the profound impact of words. So what words actually do for us. How when we choose our words carefully, or we notice our words, or we're more aware of the words that we use about ourselves, that can really change a lot of fundamental things like our self-esteem and our confidence. Also their impact day to day. So the impact of the words we use to other people in our relationships, our colleagues at work, for example. And also very, very typically our language habits. So again, there might be certain habits we've fallen into we're not even aware of. The types of words we use about ourselves, the types of framing we use when we're talking about difficult things or things that have happened in our day, and how those kind of habits can be either helpful or potentially not so helpful, and how we can change those. And again, really about those kind of making subtle shifts to transform our mental health and well-being, boosting our motivation with kind of how we talk to ourselves and others, and kind of building on that kind of positivity and optimism, but very much in a realistic way. You know, there are challenges. We're not going to fix everything, but what can we control in our own world? What's in our ability to control? Because if we focus our energy on that, then we can get somewhere. And then we have to learn what we can't control and try and let go of that as well. And hopefully some practical strategies for you all to kind of take home, to practice, to think about, to share. So fingers crossed that's what you'll be leaving with at the end of the talk today. So we'll move on to the next slide. So first of all, I think it's really healthy and really helpful to talk about actually what well-being is. We hear a lot about mental health and feeling good, and there's sometimes I think in the last 5 or 6 years, those words have become a little bit shiny and a bit sort of superficial and potentially a bit overused, so they lose their power. So I think it's really helpful for all of us just to sit back and say, well, what is well-being? What does being well mean? And I prefer, again, it's a slight shift in words, but I prefer being well to well-being, because that's what it is. When you wake up in the morning, how are you thinking about yourself? Are your thoughts making you feel good? Are your actions making you feel good and supporting your health and how you're feeling? So what is well-being for you? I mean, for me, it's a very simple definition. It's about feeling good about yourself and the world around you. And it's being able to get on with life in the way that you want to get on with it. So you're not kind of facing any obstructions or difficulties in terms of doing what you'd like to do. Lots of different people have different models for what well-being is. I quite like this pictorial representation of what well-being is. There are lots and lots of different spheres. And this often reminds me of a Venn diagram from our math lessons at school. But we're not just one thing. We have our emotional world, we have our social world, so important, our intellectual world, physical health, financial, our work, our occupational side of things, and our spiritual side as well. Whether or not we're religious or not, or spiritual, or we have certain beliefs and things that make us feel better, and we're part of, we have a sense of belonging. So it's just really interesting, I think, for maybe all of you, if you get a chance to think about what well-being is for you, what it looks like, and maybe even think about these 8 sort of areas. How are you doing in each of these? What's kind of doing really well at the moment? What's potentially a little bit lower? Maybe a mark out of 10 is quite useful. It's quite a gross way of doing it, but I think it just helps you reflect on where you are. And then you can start to identify potentially which areas you want to build on and work on. And for me, well-being is different to happiness. I think happiness is a fleeting emotion. You kind of have a fleeting moment of happiness or fleeting period of happiness. But I think well-being is much more fundamental. It's a thing underneath the happiness, the thing that is consistent, underneath that kind of fleeting rise in mood. And I think that is really what we want to be aiming for. Not necessarily happiness, but true well-being, truly being well. So I'll move on to the next slide. So I've just stopped being a trustee for something called Action for Happiness. I was a trustee for them for about 2 to 3 years. And I've just put this briefly on here because they've done a lot of research about happiness and what brings us happiness. And they've come up with these 10 keys, these 10 different areas. And what's interesting about these 10 keys is that when you look at them, they're all free. They're all quite easily accessible. So trying things out, giving, relating, emotions, acceptance. These are all things that we actually, most of us have the ability to access. Apart from obviously the challenges of life, how busy life is, those potentially get in the way. But when you think about these concepts, and this is evidence-based, research-based stuff, these are all free, and they're all actually things that we could potentially introduce a little bit more of in our day as well. And when you look at these 10 keys, there are quite a few of them that actually relate to words, communicating, how we interact with others or ourselves. So for example, our emotions, how we notice how we're feeling, how we talk about ourselves in terms of our thoughts. Relating, a social connection is one of the most important drivers for happiness and well-being. And we know that actually when we have meaningful relationships with people, that is a real safety net in terms of our mental health. And the more groups of people we have as well, in terms of potentially maybe you've got some people, at gym class, you've got some colleagues at work, the more of those different groups, different identities you have, the better and more likely you are to actually feel happy. So just worth just thinking about that for yourself potentially. We'll move on to the next slide. So I just want to start off, I think I'm going to cover, I suppose, this talk in 2 different parts. So first is our internal language, if you like, or who we think we are. So this is about the relationship we have with ourselves and the element of words and language we use about ourselves, to ourselves, inside our heads. And we don't often think about this. We hear what we say when we talk to other people. We might we might be aware of our thoughts, but we don't really stop and think about how we're thinking about ourselves, the words we're using, for example. But that is everything. That is a huge foundation step and point in terms of how we feel, our happiness and our well-being is how we treat ourselves. How the words we use to describe ourselves, the conditioning that we've kind of grown up with or absorbed, and we'll go into this a bit later, and our beliefs about ourselves and how those relate to our self-esteem and our confidence and the difference between those 2 things. So who do we think we are, first of all? And the second element we'll go through is our external language, if you like, so how we interact with the world and with other people. And we're going to cover the most important thing in our lives is our relationships. So something called love languages, which we'll come on to. The essentials of communication, how we actually communicate with other people and what that looks like and what good communication is and how that can impact, again, our health and well-being and our ability to express ourselves with other people. And then storytelling. So what do we tell ourselves about our life, our past, present and future? So we're going to go through those just in order. So we'll move on to the next slide. So first of all, our internal language. So think about your identity. And again, this is something you might want to do now or a bit later. So be really honest, take a bit of paper and write down the kind of words that you use to describe yourself. Now, that might be in your head, it might be to someone else. Write down a very, very honest list. It might be kind, it might be impatient. I'm thinking about myself here. It might be I've got no common sense. I make quite a lot of mistakes. What are these phrases or words that you use to describe yourself? Because interestingly, when you have that down on a list and you look at it, just ask yourself, are those true? Because when we grow up, from when we're little, we absorb lots of other people's opinions, what people say about us, the words they use about us, the labels they use about us. And we take those on board when we're young and we believe every single one of them and we adopt them. And then it then becomes us, and then it forms part of our personality or who we think we are. And our identity is very, very important, because what we think about ourselves and those kind of personality traits that we kind of list about ourselves really does impact not just how we feel and our mental health, but the opportunities we take up, the things we agree to do, the people we choose to surround ourselves with, the jobs we decide to take, every single thing that we decide to do in life. Fundamentally, at the base of it, there's a lot of it to do with who we think we are. So I come on now to this kind of idea of labels. Labels are very useful if they're on food packaging, maybe, but they're not always useful when they're related to human beings. And we do get labelled a lot by different people, our parents, our teachers, our siblings, our partners, and we label ourselves. And we tend to kind of stick those into categories. So they're either good labels or bad labels. But again, are they true? What does believing that about yourself make you change in terms of your behaviour? So when I was younger, for example, at school, I was always told I was a very oversensitive child, and I was very sensitive and quite anxious. And I grew up believing that. And the way people said it when I was growing up at school made it sound really bad. So I was like, gosh, I'm really oversensitive. I should change that about myself. And then as I got older, I thought, well, do you know what? What's wrong with being sensitive? That surely is showing empathy and understanding and the ability to relate to other people's feelings. And what's wrong with that? So that's just a very tiny example of potentially a label that you may have been given that actually is impacting not just your self-esteem and your confidence, but also the kinds of opportunities you take up now. If you're offered a promotion at work or you're offered a new opportunity to go and do something, do you take it? Or is there a label and a word you use about yourself that's actually limiting you from doing that? And we can decide now, we can change that sort of thought. We don't have to necessarily accept that label anymore. Is it true? Is it true? It sounds a very simple thing, but it's very, very powerful if you try it. And we'll move on to the next slide. So realizing all of these things is so important. If we don't realize, we can't do anything about it, we can't change anything. So pay attention to the words that you're either using about yourself internally or your thoughts. And again, when we're talking about being aware of our thoughts and the words we're using, it's not to judge them, it's not to criticize them, it's not to tell ourselves off about them. It's just to notice and say, okay, that's interesting. I'm thinking that about myself and I'm using that word about myself again. But we don't have to follow that word and engage with it. And we can just let it pass. We just watch it. And gradually, the more and more you do that, the more you understand the kinds of patterning that your thoughts, repetitive thoughts have, and then potentially the impact of those repetitive words on how you feel and your well-being in terms of your mental and emotional health. So become aware, don't criticize, because that adds another layer of negativity onto how you talk about yourself. But just be curious, treat it like a game. What am I thinking about myself today? What am I thinking in this moment? What words am I using? Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I could reframe that differently. I wonder if I could change that word to something else. And if I do, how does that make me feel? What difference does that make in terms of how I feel? And what difference could that make in terms of now what my actions are as a result of that? So just try it. Just treat it like a fun experiment rather than anything heavy. And you might be surprised by what happens. We'll go on to the next slide. So the second part of our internal language, kind of who we think we are, is our conditioning. So again, who do you tell yourself you are? If enough people tell you something, does it make it true? Not necessarily. Absolutely not. And I come back to this old adage of fear. What causes fear? It's false evidence appearing real. And conditioning basically just means, I'm sure you're all aware of that concept, but if someone tells us something, we respond in a certain way, we believe it, we then do it more and more and more and more, and we become conditioned to respond to a certain stimulus in a certain way, and that can very much be related to the language and the words we use about ourselves. And the most powerful thing about conditioning is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the words you use about yourself, how you talk to yourself, really does almost come into fruition, if you like, because of that change in our behaviours, what we decide to take up, what we refuse, the opportunities we have in life, etc. So just think about the power you have if you were changing that conditioning about who you are, your identity, who people have told you are. What could that change in your life? It's very, very interesting. And again, it's quite an exciting thing to do, to be curious about that and to change that. And also looking back into your past. So what has potentially happened in your life previous to this that maybe has come about because of something that you've been conditioned to believe about yourself, or the words that have been used about you, or the words you've used about yourself. That's not to regret anything. It's more just to be aware and think, that's really interesting. I wonder why that happened, or I wonder why I did that, or I wonder why I responded that way. The real magic in that is that you can now change that and move forward into something different. So we'll go on to the next slide. So I love films and stories. Stories are everything. We'll come on to storytelling a bit later. But this is one of the tips I think you can use in a strange way. So again, a kind of a fun and curious thing to do, strategy to use. But use movies and stories. They are based on real life, and we all love a good story, don't we? And Karate Kid for me is like the most idyllic story, because you've got a hero who you really want to do well, you really want to succeed, and they're kind of they're going into a fight, they get knocked down, they're completely just at a loss, everything's fallen apart. And then you see that lovely kind of musical montage. They meet their mentor, they start training again, they build themselves up. And you see that lovely sort of montage of scenes where they're becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And then eventually they win. And so this is something that can really give you motivation. If you're struggling with confidence, self-esteem, the words you're using about yourself, kind of all of these different habits, see yourself as a character in that kind of film or story of your life. So, develop your character afresh. Be a hero and a mentor to yourself. Don't look outside yourself for that. Ask for support, but don't look necessarily outside yourself. And ask yourself how you deal with failure. Because again, the word failure and what we kind of interpret with that, with the words we use around failing, can be very, very negative and very self-defeating. So how do you deal with failure? What is failure to you? What does a mistake look like? Once we reframe failure and the words we use about ourselves in terms of failing, we see that actually there is no failure. There's just things that happen that we learn from. So what can we learn from that, and how can we take that forward? And very importantly, how do you speak to yourself when things are challenging? So when you're having a difficult day at work, things are really stressful, what do you say to yourself? Do you know how to comfort yourself? Have you got strategies that can help you reassure yourself, give yourself emotional safety? How kind are you to yourself? These sound very simple things, and they sound like things we potentially leave for primary school children, but they are the most important when it comes to the words we're using in terms of our mental health and well-being. So we'll move on to the next slide. So I just put in here about challenging feelings, because again, feelings come from words that we use about ourselves, the language we use about ourselves, that internal language. We think a certain thought, oh, I'm useless at everything. We get a feeling from that, either sadness or anxiety or whatever else it might be. And I think it's really important here to think about feelings, how you process feelings. What are your strategies for processing your feelings? Is it to cry? Is it to talk to someone? Is it to exercise? Is it to listen to music? We have to embrace our feelings, and it's actually really helpful to name our feelings and use words and language to name our feelings, because then they become tangible. We can see them for what they are, and we can then do something about them, and we can manage them a little bit better. When we don't name feelings or have words for feelings or express our feelings, they get all jumbled up, they sit inside ourselves, and they come out later on in a very unhealthy way, potentially. So there is no should or shouldn't to the feelings that you're feeling. There is no good or bad. Every feeling has a place and a purpose. So find that and let them in. Have a chat with them, address them by name. I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm feeling sad at the moment. Really important to name them, because then you have much more of a chance to then reframe them with the language you use inside yourself, to express them, to let them out in a healthy way. So we'll go on to the next slide. And then the last bit of our internal language is our beliefs and self-esteem. And this is a real revelation. This is a real revelation to me when I first realised this, when I was a teenager, I think. So really, our self-esteem is just our beliefs about ourselves. It's a set of beliefs or thoughts we've chosen to take on board and believe about who we are. And that sets up how good our self-esteem is. It's as simple as that. The good news about that is that we can change that set of beliefs. We don't have to necessarily accept that. We can change the words we're using. We can change the belief system, or that kind of folder or file of beliefs we have about ourselves, into something different. And we can then change how good we feel about ourselves. And self-esteem is very different from confidence. So confidence is very sort of activity specific. So, are you confident in being a public speaker? Are you confident about, I don't know, going on a tightrope and tightrope walking? These are very activity specific. Self-esteem is much more about how you feel and what you think about yourself. So again, what are the beliefs about yourself? What are the set of thoughts that you've chosen to accept? And are they serving you, or are they creating obstacles and blocking opportunities? So thinking about that in terms of that set of beliefs, how that impacts your self-esteem, because that affects our relationships, our work opportunities, and that being very different from confidence. So I'll move on to the next slide. And again, you might have some doubt around this. So doubt is a very natural and normal process. Always, you can doubt external things, but never yourself. So stop carrying doubts that aren't yours. Sometimes when we make decisions in life, we have our parents or our friends, people giving us all of their opinions, their judgments about what we're doing and what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. Don't take on board other people's doubts, and notice when you are starting to doubt, is it a realistic doubt? Is it based in realism, or actually is it something from the past? Is it something from those old words or that kind of language you're using about yourself that's kind of coming up from the past? There can be useful self-doubt. Doubt is useful when we're questioning what we're doing. Are we doing the right thing? Do we need to change something? But then there's doubt which is just self-sabotaging. So recognize those things. Don't push away doubt, just embrace it and try to understand why it's there and the nature of that doubt as well. So next slide, please. And again, letting yourself shine. This is all about confidence. So reduce the negatives, accentuate the positives. It can help other people as well. So when you're communicating with other people, it can really help them to express who they are, to build their confidence, their self-esteem. And really don't ask for permission to do that. We're very, very good at being negative about ourselves. We can be positive as well. And that is very important for our confidence and our self-esteem. So next slide, please. So moving on now to the external language that we use, and this is really fascinating. As I said before at the beginning, our relationships are the mainstay of our mental and emotional well-being. That has been shown time and time again in terms of research and evidence. And one of the really important things I want you to take away today is love languages. So this is about how we interact with others. And this is a concept developed by Gary Chapman, PhD, in his book called The 5 Love Languages. Now, this is very much around the relationships you have in your life. So that might be friends, family, romantic partners. And we're going to move on to the next slide just to show you what these love languages are. So there are 5 of them, and this is very much about, when we say love language, we are basically talking about how someone else feels loved. So we have here the 5 ones. We have words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, gifts, and physical touch. And out of these 5, most of us, or all of us, will have one of these where we will feel most loved. So for example, for me, it's probably physical touch. So someone holding my hand or giving me a hug. I might kind of feel loved in some of the other ways, someone showing me love in the other ways, but generally you have a predominant love language. One resonates most with you, and that's called our primary love language. Now, the most important thing about this is that we could be with our romantic partner or our friend or our family member, and we could be thinking that we are showing them so much love and so much attention that they should feel really good about it. But if their love language is not the same as ours, they're not going to feel it. So you have to adapt kind of almost how you show your love to that other person for them to feel what you're trying to show them, and vice versa. You don't necessarily have to change who you are or what you're doing, but it's really interesting to think about how other people in your life, the people you care about, feel loved and cared for. And potentially sometimes that can actually mismatch. So when there are difficulties in relationships, or the way we're communicating our love. It can sometimes be because we're not matching to that specific love language that other person can hear and feel and see. So this is just a really interesting thing to think about, and maybe an experiment to try later on tonight, I don't know, with someone in your life. We'll move on to the next slide. The second part of our external language, so how we interact with the world and other people around us, is very much about our ability to communicate with other people. So the words we use. Now, this is very important, not just in times of good times, but in times of conflict and argument, disagreement. And again, when we have difficulties in our relationships, that can really impact our well-being. So this is all about practicing and habit loops. So the more we do it, our brain will form certain habit loops with neuroplasticity in our brain, nerve networks, and the more we do it and we get a better reward or something shifts, we're going to kind of strengthen that habit loop and it will become automatic. So this is very much about practicing these sorts of skills. And again, these might sound very simple communication skills, but they are everything. So active listening, this is about not using words and not using language, necessarily non-verbal communication, non-blaming, being honest, being able to resolve conflicts. So not using judgmental words or blaming words, but stating facts when things are difficult, and making sure that we're communicating with the other person on a regular basis. So this is all about our choice of words in our relationships, the style of how we use words in our relationships, and all of this adds to our well-being. We'll move on to the next slide. These are just a few other ones. So recognizing different styles, as I said, of how people hear or listen. Some people prefer text messages. Some people prefer face-to-face interactions. How does that other person hear that? And how do you hear that? Respect, attention, putting away your phone, very important. Really giving that person your full attention and choosing the right time and the right place in terms of how you're communicating with them. We'll go on to the next slide. And the last one is about storytelling. So this is very, very powerful. Storytelling is not just for children. We tell ourselves stories all the time about our life, about our past and what happened in it, about our present and how we're doing in our life at the moment and our future. And we learn through stories. Storytelling has been a tradition throughout humanity that has been so powerful and we've learned so much from. But we can change that story. And again, that story isn't necessarily true. So my question to you is, what is your story? When you look back at the past or the present or the future, what story are you telling yourself about that? What are you telling yourself is going to happen? That's called worry. What are you telling yourself that you should regret? That's back in the past. And what are you telling yourself about now and where you are at the moment? And who told you that story? What's your character in this story? When we go to a dinner party or we meet new people, they'll say to you, oh, what's your name? Where do you live? What do you do? Are you married? This is all about kind of what character do you play? And what character are other people sort of seeing? It's very interesting. And stories, as I said, have real power. So we can rewrite our story, we can change our story, we can reframe our story, not necessarily adapting things that have happened or not happened, but we can change that into something a bit more hopeful, a bit more optimistic. And we can use different language about our future, about our present or about our past that can really impact how we feel about those three phases of our life. If we tell ourselves horrible what if stories about the future, we're going to feel worried, anxious. If we tell ourselves blaming stories full of guilt, we're going to feel heavy and sad about our life and full of regrets. So it's very interesting just to ask yourself, what is my story? What do I tell myself and other people about that? And how can I rewrite it? Do I want to rewrite it? And how can I change that? Next slide, please. So yes, it's about finding your why. All of these things are about kind of your purpose. So, purpose for me is everything. It, again, has been shown in evidence, scientific and research evidence, that having a meaning, having a purpose, the reason you get up out of bed in the morning, is one of the key things for our well-being. And a lot of the time you might see Oprah Winfrey talking about purpose and talking to a monk who sat on a mountain for however many years. It doesn't have to be that grand. Ask yourself some questions. Why did you get up out of bed in the morning? What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to bring to the world? And it sounds like a very small thing, but it's everything. Because when things are challenging, when things get tough and difficult, that is what makes us persevere through all the difficulties and the challenge. So finding that and finding what really brings you alive is everything. And the language you use around who you are, what your purpose is, can really invigorate your mental health and well-being. Next slide, please. So I'm going to end now. It's been a very kind of brief and whistle-stop tour. I've gone through a lot of different concepts, but I just wanted to give you an overview really of the kinds of impacts words and language we use can really have on our health. And I'm just leaving you with this tweet from Radio 1 that I do quite often in terms of giving advice. These words from Dr. Rada may be the thing you need to hear right now. And I'm only ending with that, not to talk about myself, but to end with it to show you that when I'm sitting doing the radio in my bedroom or my room at home, I always think about what words does someone else need to hear out there that could help them feel better. And I'm saying to you now, there are words that you use to yourself and words you use to other people in your life and to the world around you that can really change how much better you feel and really impact the people around you. So thank you very much.
Wow, Dr. Rada, thank you so much. You've given us lots to think about, and I'm aware that it's what you've said has resonated with people who are watching and listening from the delegates that have come in. And we've got more questions than we can actually cover in the time that we've got left, actually. So I'm going to pick out a couple and let's see how far we go with them. The first one that's come in from Kaylee Davis. Wellbeing is so important in our teams. And as a wellbeing champion in her team, she's always looking for ways to promote it. Do you have any practical tips on how to promote wellbeing in a practical way within the constraints of a busy workforce who don't necessarily share bases offices at all times?
Yes, such a good question. First of all, well done on being a wellbeing champion, because we need people like you in the workforce at the moment. It's a really difficult environment. So well done, first of all. I think you have to keep it simple because the systems we work in, they are difficult. They're not always amenable to doing everything all at once. So I would say choose sort of 3 things that could be achieved. So kind of split it into three areas. So what can you do for people's minds and brains? What can you do for their bodies? And what can you do for their sort of social and emotional health? So can you, for example, create a community where you're doing, if you've got remote meetings at any point, can you go for walks while you're doing a remote meeting together for your bodies? Can you encourage, I don't know, a running club or people to get together to share what they're doing for their exercise in terms of their bodies or what they're doing for their physical health? That's the first thing, or even sleep as part of that as well. What they're doing for their minds. So one of the things I think about in terms of clinical practice, which is probably the most important thing and the most easy thing to achieve, is to just have or to put in place regular breaks, regular short breaks. I know even saying that sounds really intangible and impractical. And I know sometimes you go through a shift without even going to the toilet because you haven't got time to drink. But if you can, short, regular breaks, if you make that into a kind of a team effort, something that everyone's doing, something that everyone is encouraging everyone else to do, even at tiny, small intervals, make that part of your work ethos, make that part of your team ethos, because when one person is doing it, it doesn't necessarily kind of infiltrate, but if everyone is supporting everyone else to do it, encouraging each other to do it, saying to someone, hang on a minute, you've been working for however long, go and have just a 2-minute break, go and have a little walk. That really does start to become a habit and an ethos within a team. And then what can you do for the sort of social and emotional health? So can you celebrate someone who's achieved something regularly, for example? Can you have either remote or face-to-face social events? However infrequently, can you build a sort of a social community where people are sharing who they are, what's happening in their lives? I know these are all very difficult, and even the small things are difficult, but just starting even with those basics and starting that being kind of, I suppose, creating that as an ethos really, really can change if everyone works together to engage with that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have a go at combining 2 questions here because I think we might cover it. And sorry for those people who've put the questions in if I've completely morphed your question by doing this. But how do you promote well-being and positivity when there are people around you who are more negative or critical in their attitude and in their talk? And especially, how would you do that in a group situation? Also, if you're an independent practitioner who's having to carry everything by themselves?
Very good question. So, first of all, however difficult it is, we know that having an optimistic attitude is actually really helpful for us. It's been shown to kind of improve longevity, but also allow us to live a more meaningful life. So optimism, but it has to be realistic optimism. When we use the word optimism, sometimes it gets clouded with, oh, that's, you can't, what are you talking about? Be realistic. You can be optimistic in a realistic way. I think those two things are possible. First of all, it's worth still striving towards, even though you've got other people who are a little bit more negative. Firstly, try not to, I suppose, blame or judge the people who are being a bit more negative. Sometimes it can get to us and we can say, oh, why are they being like that? But then there's always a reason as to why someone's being negative. They may have other things going on in their life. They may have difficulties or problems. I'm not talking about fixing those or kind of going into that, but I'm just saying, if we can remove some of our judgment or feeling about them being negative, that already shifts something in that dynamic, because we come to that interaction with a slightly more open attitude. The other thing I would say is people will only take on board what they're ready and open to engage with at any particular time. It's like buses coming in. Work with the people who are around you who you can see a little chink of light. There's something there that when you say something, they're a little bit more receptive. Work with them, because optimism is momentum. If you can get more people who are slightly more optimistic, start taking small steps towards that, then the momentum builds. And then what you'll find is a bit like sort of lots of shining lights in the dark. Things will become a bit lighter and a bit lighter. So work with the people who are receptive to it. Try to let go of the people who aren't. And when you're listening, when you're going in being very positive, you can hear the words that people are saying who are being negative, but try not to take them in. I know that's really hard, but it's a really, really great practice, a really good sort of spiritual practice for you to sit there and just say, okay, this person's saying this, I'm going to let that just go. I'm going to try not to absorb it. And just see what difference that attitude in terms of your attitude going into that has on you and on them. Because sometimes the more we resist negativity, the more we challenge it, potentially, the bigger it can get. So there's a chapter in my book called Changing the Unchangeable. It's a bit like a game when you've got two people and they're coming together, a bit like a chess game. They're used to the pieces moving in a certain way because that's what they've always been used to. If you change something up and react or behave slightly differently, the other person doesn't quite know what to do. And that paradoxically can actually shift something in them, which might just change the dynamic. So a few tips, hopefully they've helped.
Perfect, thank you. And this question that's coming from Bethany Ford is looking at the reality that a lot of people are facing at the moment. So how would you recommend promoting well-being and positivity within a team who are going through a real period of uncertainty due to service changes, which are naturally having a real negative impact on the team?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm sorry to hear that. And there's a lot of upheaval, a lot of uncertainty. And like you say, uncertainty breeds anxiety, discontent, low mood. It can be really difficult to keep people motivated when they don't know what's happening. So first of all, I think in times of uncertainty, the only thing that we can do to help ourselves, I think, is to find any elements of certainty that we can. And by that, I mean, where's the certainty individually? I know we're talking about a team here, but in the individuals within that team, how can you all support each other to find certainty in your own personal lives? So keeping up structure and habits in times of uncertainty is really helpful. So what keeps each of you well in that group? And what are the certain things like, do you go to the gym 3 times a week? Do you see your friend once a month? What are the things, do you have a team meeting that brings people together, however often? What are the certain things you know about in your team? And that could be about the types of relationships you have, the level of kindness you show to each other, how often you're listening to each other and expressing how you feel about the uncertainty, I think is really helpful. So find the structure, as much structure and certainty as you can, personally and within the team as you know it, and try to really make the most of that certainty that you have left while things are in upheaval. But I think the most important thing about that situation is to really encourage the team to be open and honest and talk about it. And that's for a few reasons. It's not to encourage people to get more down or to complain. It's to allow it to be out in the open. When there are difficult things going on, if everyone knows about it and everyone's talking about it and sharing things, then we can understand each other more. When people have difficulties or that they might be behaving in certain ways, we can understand why they're behaving like that. So openness, transparency, sharing, all of that stuff, and working together. You know, in those times, that's when team structures break down, more likely. So the ultimate thing in that is to keep your team as strong and resilient as possible, and that is by being kind, by sharing, by talking, and by being good communicators with each other. But yeah, I do hear you, and I really hope that things get a bit better.
Dr. Rada, thank you so much. There are so many more questions than we can, as I said, then we've got time to answer. They are in the Q&A section, so I don't know if you will have an opportunity to put a couple of one-liners to some of the questions that are there. That will be amazing. But really appreciated this opportunity to think about it, to end our conference, because we know this is a reality that people are facing on a day-to-day basis, and how do we do life better for ourselves in the situations that we're in. So I'm wanting to wrap up conference, if you like. Not if you like, I do want to wrap up conference. We're coming to the end of 2 days. And many of you here today may not know that the RCSLT conference couldn't happen without you. So this year we had 155 abstracts received for the scientific program, and 121 of them were accepted. And that means that we've been able to showcase 60 posters and 61 oral presentations over the 2 days. But on that note, I would like to think about some mentions of some things that have happened in the last 2 days. So we have, if we move over to the next slide, the highest scoring abstract overall was by Dr. Samba, Maximising the Impact of Speech and Language Therapy for Children with Speech Sound Disorders. So that was the highest scoring abstract. The highest scoring abstract that was from early career researchers was Maria Kearney, Ellie Jenkins, Sarah Corter, and Dr. Susan Guthrie. So thank you for, and I'm hoping that people have had an opportunity to look at these. And the last mention that I'd like to give is for the IJLCD Student Prize. It was awarded earlier in April. It was given by the International Journal of Language and Communication Disorders to Lauren Miller for her work on the use of psychological interventions in the management of developmental stammering in adults, a scoping review. You can view Ren's poster under the innovation poster section. So congratulations to all of you who submitted an abstract and that was accepted, and well done to all of you who've had a special mention just now. So it's now down to me to give some general thank yous. I'd like to thank all the chairs and the speakers for the keynotes, impact and innovation sessions, and the scientific sessions. To all of our dedicated members and colleagues who've been abstract reviewers and part of the planning groups behind the scenes who helped shape this event. Many of whom you haven't seen necessarily, but without their input, it wouldn't have come to what it has been. A huge thank you to our sponsors and exhibitors. So that's Salt Road, Splows, Course Beetle, and Asseltip. All the staff at the RCSLT and Crowdcoms who have spent the last year shaping the content and the logistics for this event, so that over, as I said before, 1,300 of us could come together virtually from all over the world. And of course, I'd like to give you all a very big thank you for being here, our members, colleagues, partners, stakeholders, and service users. A few reflections from me on the conference and some hopes for the future, really. It's been a really wonderful and packed 2 days. There's definitely been a lot of learning and sharing of knowledge and skills, and it's been really great to see how the profession has changed over the past 80 years. And it'll be interesting to see what lies ahead for speech and language therapy and those with lived experiences in the years to come. We're working in contexts that are ever changing. And what does that mean for us? Just a reminder that this session and all of the live sessions have been recorded and they are available to watch within the programme. So the platform, there's video sections there, you'll be able to access them there. Please do leave us some feedback about the whole event, the entire conference, as well as the individual sessions. The survey is on the left tab so that we know from your feedback what aspects we would like to keep and what we would like to improve for 2027 conference. It's mad to be thinking that those are the numbers we're talking about. The year numbers, I should say, that we're talking about. Just to let you know that the Challenge Hub competition is still running, and the top 3 on the leaderboard on the 1st of December will have the opportunity to pick a gift card, and the winner will also receive a copy of Dr. Rada's book. So please do look out for the code that's going to be coming up. So it's been a truly inspiring space sharing a conference with so many passionate colleagues. Thank you for everything that you bring to the profession and to the people you support. I'd like to wish you a wonderful evening, and I look forward to seeing how our collective work continues to grow before we gather again in 2027. So thank you to everyone. My code is now going to show, so please take a note of it and take it over to the challenge space. Thank you. Good night.